maybe one, two. I know it happened with Michael. I can't remember if it happened with Kendall. But when they were young, every once in a while, they would have a nightmare or something, or just be restless that night. So they would have to sleep in the bed with me and my wife. And there's we start off like this. There's an image that'll be coming on your screen in a second. Waiting for it. Temptation. Wait for it. It's coming. Or do I control it? There we go. Perfect. So we start off like this. I'm on one side, my wife's on the other. Eventually something happens. The child wants to get into our bed. So there she is, right between us. So we fall asleep, and something mysterious happens while we're sleeping. Somehow the child, and maybe if this happened to you guys, you can relate. Child starts to move, starts to turn, start to reorient themselves a little bit. And I'm slowly being, right, yeah, thank you. I'm slowly being moved out of position. And I don't know why she starts this way and turn this way. It never made sense to me. I'm not sure she's like with the planet's axis. I'm not sure what's happening there, but a lot of stuff is happening. So she's moving and moving, and I'm slowly being edged out ever so slowly. Notice my wife. She hasn't moved at all. I'm not sure why it only happened to me. It doesn't make any sense. But I'm being slowly moved until I wake up in the morning, and that's my face. I wake up and it's like I'm on the edge of the bed. I don't know how I got here. I mean, I weigh about 200, 205 pounds. Maybe my child is maybe 20 pounds. So how does something that's so small, comparatively speaking, get to move me out of the center of the bed over to the edge of the bed? Fascinating. I'm going to date myself. How many of you guys remember? There was a group back in the day called Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. All right, yes. And they had a song that sounds a little something like this, called The Message. It says, "Don't push me, because I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head." Ha, ha, ha. Yes. So, Pastor, I don't know if you knew this, but your church is outside. Your church is outside because they know the lyrics. So anyway, don't push me because I'm close to the edge. So this is what happened here. So similar to that song lyric, there are things in your life that may be doing the same, pushing you to the edge in such a way that you end up losing your head, losing sight on who should be the head of your life, edging and pushing God out of your life. So, and there might have been a time, maybe very recently, maybe when you first came to Christ, there might have been a time when you wouldn't miss a Sunday service in person. You had to be there every Sunday. There might have been a time when you were eager to serve everywhere and anywhere in the church where there was a need. You look forward to doing life with your iGroup every week when there was a meeting. Your alarm clock was the weekday morning prayer call. Before you checked your email, text message, TikTok, or turned on the TV, you cracked open the Bible app and stayed on track with the Bible in a year. That might have been you very recently, but then something happened over time. Over time, you stopped attending morning service. You know, we kick off a morning service with, "Wake up and get yourself to church." That wouldn't be you. You wouldn't be waking up and getting yourself to church that morning. Or you would opt to, simply not come to service and want to click in online, go to YouTube. And even then, you may not do that. You would log in right when you think pastor's going to be up there on stage. You wouldn't come in for the worship. There may be some online right now. You thought you were going to see pastor. You saw me. You clicked off. Sorry about that. So sorry. That might have been them. You decided to drop serving altogether and just become a pew sitter. Your iGroup meetings, they might meet 6 times a campaign. You go to maybe 3 of them. And when you open the Bible app, you find that you're 2 weeks behind on your Bible in a year, and that 6 a.m. weekday morning call that used to be your wake-up call, now you're just hitting the snooze button. All these things, they moved you to the edge slowly over time to where you're no longer in the center of God's will. And when these things happen, there's a void left by having less God in your life, a void that we often try to fill with other things that ultimately are unfulfilling, and that can lead to less of the blessing that God has for you, and you end up less than what he intended you to be. So what are we talking about this morning? I'm going to borrow the title of my sermon from a commercial I used to see when I was growing up. They had these waffles. They were like circular. And anybody know what I'm talking about? Anyone know what they're called? Eggo waffles, absolutely. And they had a slogan, like a theme that they would say about the Eggo waffles. What would they say? Let go of my egos. Also, everyone's dating themselves this morning. That's fantastic. So I'm going to, title of my sermon comes to dropping one of the G's in there. I'm going to say let go of ego, which is edging God out. Say edging God out. Edging God out. So where does the Bible speak to this? We're going to be looking at Judges 2, 6 through 10. And I want to look at what led to Israel edging God out and counter those observations with 3 points you can reflect on and consider to prevent you from doing the same. Amen? Amen. If you're following along, you can open up the Bible app and then go to, I think it's events, and then look for Impact Church. You'll be able to follow along in the sermon in that. So let us read. I'm going to be reading from Judges 2, 6 through 10 in the North American Standard Bible, 1995 edition. Don't ask me why. That's the one that's on my Bible app, so I'm going to go with that one. So it reads like this. When Joshua had dismissed the people, the sons of Israel went each to his inheritance to possess the land. The people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who had seen all the great work of the Lord, which he had done for Israel. Then Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. And they buried him in the territory of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. All that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord, nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. So I look at these sets of verses, and I see them as bookends. I see on one end, you have Joshua dismissing the people of Israel, and on the other end, you have what ultimately happened is a generation arising that did not know the Lord. So the question that gets posed is, what happened in between these two bookends? We have the beginning and we have the end. What happened in the middle? And we want to find out what happened in the middle. And to do that, we sort of have to double back a little bit and fill in the gaps. And we sort of have to start by looking at Joshua's dismissal. And that really gets captured in Joshua chapter 24, where he dismisses the people. Now, I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but here's kind of essentially what happened. You know, they've spent all this time in the wilderness. They're on the precipice of going into the promised land. And I can imagine the people they're raring to go. They're like, we want to get in there. We're ready to take off and run our leg of the race that everyone up to this point in time has led us to. Deacon Brawley preached a few Sundays ago about passing it on. And he talked about he's the image of a relay race. And if you know anything about relay races, certainly the one leg that's already running, they've got to extend the baton as they're running to the next leg. And normally the next leg, even before the other runner gets there, they've already taken off running. So they want to sort of keep pace. But in addition to keeping pace, not only is this generation or this runner extending the baton, something also very key has to happen, and that is the generation ahead or the runner ahead has to reach back for the baton that's there. And if that reach back doesn't happen, the baton doesn't get passed. And the handoff requires that other leg to reach back. So point number one to let go of edging God out is to remember to reach back and refresh. Reach back and refresh. And that's what Joshua is doing here. The people are ready to take off. They're ready to jump into the promised land and take what God has given them. But he said, well, hold on, before I pass this baton, let me refresh you a little bit on what happened. Remember how God, where he brought you from and how he brought you through and where he brought you through, where he brought you to. He says, look where we came from. We were in Egypt, where we were slaves and we were oppressed for so many years. And then God took us out of Egypt, and then he brought us through the Red Sea and then through the wilderness and fighting with other nations. And finally, he's brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey, because often, in order to appreciate where you are, you need to appreciate how you got there. And if you don't remember to reach back, the baton doesn't get passed on. The dream doesn't get passed on. The story doesn't get passed on. The blessing doesn't get passed on. The mission doesn't get passed on. How often do you remember to reach back and refresh yourself by reflecting on what God brought you through, where he brought you to, and where he brought you from? How many prayer warriors we got out there? Prayer warriors? One of the things we talk about, or used to talk about, I think we're still doing class 201, where you talk about the habit of prayer. They talk about a prayer journal. Anybody keep a prayer journal? A few people at Prayer Journal. It's a great way to sort of look back, reach back, and record and remember what God has done what He's done for you, what He brought you through, what He brought you to. So that's a little pro tip from me to you. Keep a prayer journal. It's a great thing to use. So remember to reach back and refresh. And that's what Joshua does. That's what he does to the people. And he encourages them to be faithful to God and serve Him only. He asks the people to make a choice. And he says, listen, this is in verse 15. If it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. How many of you know that serving God is a daily choice? It's a daily choice. The verse says, choose for yourself today. The choice that you made yesterday, maybe last year, doesn't carry over to today. He says, choose for yourself today. So point 2 to let go of edging God out is to choose daily to serve God. Choose daily to serve God. And if you notice something, observe that Joshua didn't say, choose God, or he said, choose God, choose the Lord, or choose other gods. He didn't say, there wasn't an option to do nothing. He said, you can either get with this. I'm telling you, your church is outside. Your church is outside. They know these. I don't know why, but they know these things. They know this thing. I'm not the only hip-hop head in here. You can get with this, or you can get with that. There was no get with nothing. That wasn't an option. Because we all serve something. If it's not God, then it's something we could end up serving our spouse. We end up serving our children. We end up serving our jobs. We end up serving our paychecks. We end up serving our bank accounts. We serve our dreams. Come on, preacher. We end up serving all these other things that slowly but surely edge us out of God's perfect will for us. All these things. So there is no not to serve anything. It's either serve God or these other things. We end up serving ourselves sometimes. Each choice to serve something other than God leads to edging God out more and more in our lives. So choose daily to serve God. And the people of Israel vowed that they would do that. They said they would. It's actually, they said, we'll do that. And then Joshua was like, I don't believe you guys. I spent a lot of time with you people. I've seen how y'all act. I've seen how y'all behave. Are you sure? And they're like, yeah, we're definitely going to do it. Joshua grabs a stone. He puts it there and says, talk to the stone. Tell the stone, this stone is going to be a witness for you, what's going on, just as I'm a witness. So he really sort of doubted what they wanted to do, but they doubled down on that. They said, look, we will definitely serve the Lord. So what does it look like to choose daily to serve God? I've got 2 sub-bullet points for that. Got two of them. Let's go back to the text. So the people are dismissed to take their inheritance, and Joshua and the elders die. Joshua and the elders die. Judges 2:8-10 says, Then Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and they buried him in the territory of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. All that generation also were gathered to their fathers. What's significant about them dying is that they were witnesses. They were witnesses. They saw and experienced God's power. They were there. Verse says, in all the days of the elder who survived Joshua, who had seen all the great work of the Lord, which he had done for Israel. You ever tell someone a story or have a story told to you? And they're telling you all the everything that happened. They're giving you all the high points, the low points, the tear-jerking moments. It's a cliffhanger. It's got laughter. It's got pain. It's got turmoil. And you're listening or you're telling them, and they just seem sort of underwhelmed. He's like, okay, nice story. I don't see what the big deal is. And sometimes either you would finish the story, they might finish the story with, well, you had to be there. You ever one of those had to be there sort of stories? You were there, so it seemed kind of, it was monumental to you, but so a had to be there thing. Well, the funny thing is that sometimes a story alone doesn't do it. Sometimes someone else's recollection and retelling just doesn't do it for us. I've got one of my favorite movies is The Matrix, and there's a quote that Morpheus says to Neo, and he says, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. Psalm 34 says, taste and see that the Lord is good. The generation that arose, they weren't there when God did all these wonderful things for Israel. They didn't taste, they didn't see, they didn't witness, they didn't experience these things that he did. They didn't have those experiences. They didn't see what God really can do. They heard about it. As things were being passed on, they heard about the stories, the wilderness, the Egypt, slavery. They said, okay, great. That sounds great. Sounds good. Weren't there. I'm sure it was impactful for you guys. But they didn't have that experiences. They didn't be able to really relive that. So not having a story of their own, a powerful story of what God did for them, sort of contributed to God being edged out in their lives. So one of the sub-bullet points of making a daily choice to serve God is to give God a chance to show off. Give God a chance to show off. Sister D. Parker preached a couple of Sundays ago about going from your comfort zone to your courage zone. And she talked about that, preached powerfully about going from your comfort to your courage zone. Making a daily choice to serve God does not consist of staying only where you are comfortable and doing only what comforts you. You've got to move from your comfort to your courage zone. My Pentecostal over here, maybe other places, they have something called a testimony service. Okay, we know about those. So testimony service, someone gets up and they share their testimony about God and what he did for them. A lot of people would do this. A lot of people are listening. And some of you may have heard the breakdown of testimony sort of being, test time on, you find out why at the end. Anyone ever heard of that one? No? I'm the only one? One person. Thank you. But to have a testimony, you have to have a test. And some of us don't even want to show up for the exam. Some of us don't want to put ourselves in a position to where we are tested and then have a testimony. Some of us don't want to put ourselves in a position where God can show up powerfully for ourselves and our lives. You have to put yourself in position because God wants to show up for you powerfully in your life. He wants to make a way out of no way. He wants to part seas for you. He wants to have walls fall down for you, provide sustenance from heaven for you. He wants to win battles for you. He wants to show off, so let him. Let him, because he wants to get the glory. So give it to him. So give God a chance to show off. So the people take off and they go to possess the land. And Judges 2-6 says, when Joshua had dismissed the people, the sons of Israel went each to his inheritance to possess the land. Let's look at inheritance for a second as we talk about what it still means to make a daily choice to serve God. Now, normally an inheritance is stipulated in a will. Wife and I recently did our wills not too long ago. Talk about, what we have, what do we want to leave to our kids. And if my kids were here, they would say, what wealth? And they said, we live with y'all. We see what you have. We don't know if we want it. And I would say, we have a wealth of love to give you guys, kids. But usually a will contains stipulations. It contains, if there's great wealth to be passed on, there's things you got to do, things you can't do. It comes with conditions, things to do, things to not to do. And we want our kids to inherit what we're giving them. We are leaving something behind, and it would bless us for them to receive it. It would bless us for them to receive it and do something with what we are giving them. And when we think about choosing daily to serve God, it's often that we see serving as something proactive that we are doing, like some sort of action we're taking, the ways in which we are giving of our time, of our talent, and our tenth, which is something that we talk about in one of our classes as well, in order to serve God, serve God's people, or serve the church. So it's often like us doing something outwardly. But how many of you know that part of serving God is willingly receiving that which he has for you? Willingly receiving that which he has for you, to take possession of what he has set aside for you. It blesses God to bless us. So sub-bullet point 2 in terms of choosing daily to serve God is to possess what God has given you. You want to possess what God has given you. Possess is a verb. It means to seize and take control of, take into one's possession, to enter into and control firmly. You ever give someone a gift? Or you received a gift, and perhaps it's something for them to use, something that they may have even wanted. You give it to them, and then maybe you visit their house. Maybe it was like a dish or something or an appliance. You visit their house, like you shake it, you've seen this happen, and the thing you gave them was like still in the box, not being used. And maybe it's been a year. It's one Christmas, you're at the next Christmas, like it's still in the box. They never really used it. They didn't take possession of that thing. How many of you greet Monday morning? It's a day that God has given you with dread. Without gratitude. It's a day God has given you, and it could have very easily been different. Try missing a day. Doesn't work out. Does not work out. Some of you meet the day with the attitude of, if I could just get through this day. And many of you probably could have finished that statement. That's not possessing a day. Possessing a day looks like this is the day that I will rejoice and be glad in it. That is a sign of taking possession. To have God show up and show out and show off for you in your life, you have to be going after and taking possession of the things he has set aside for you. So possess what God has given you. But how many of you know that it's not only about taking possession, but it's all about keeping possession? You can take something, but if you don't keep it, what good is it? And so the people of Israel went to take possession of their inheritance. They went to take possession. But Judges 1, 27 through 33, and it's not going to be in your notes. It's not going to be on the screen as well. But I'm going to read something to you. And I want you to hear sort of a theme that emerges as I read through this. But Manasseh did not drive out the people of Bethshan or Tanakh or Dor or Ibleam or Megiddo and their surrounding settlements, for the Canaanites were determined to live in that land. When Israel became strong, they pressed the Canaanites into forced labor, but never drove them out completely. Nor did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites living in Gezer, but the Canaanites continued to live there among them. Neither did Zebulun drive out the Canaanites living in Kitron or Nahalal. So these Canaanites lived among them, but Zebulun did subject them to forced labor. Nor did Asher drive out those living in Achor or Sidon or Elab or Akzib or Hilba or Aphek or Rehob. The Asherites lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land because they did not drive them out. Neither did Naphtali drive out those living in Beth Shemesh or Beth Anath, but the Naphtalites too lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land, and those living in Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath became forced laborers for them. Throughout this text, we see a theme emerge and repeated. They did not drive out the inhabitants of those lands that they were taking as a possession. Point number 3, to let go of edging God out is to drive out distractions. Drive out distractions. God wanted Israel to drive the inhabitants out. He didn't want their influences hanging out. He wanted to drive out their influence, drive out their values, their habits, their cultures, their gods, their idols, anything that was not of them. He wanted it driven out of there entirely. What's there in your life that you should be driving out? What's in your life that you should be driving out? While you ponder that, let's examine what Israel actually did do. Judges 1 also talks about that. One thing they did is they let the inhabitants continue to live there among them. Let them to continue to hang out and just hang around and continue to inhabit the land, which was supposed to be their possession. They were supposed to drive them out. Not only did the people of Israel drive them out, but they also put them to work. They forced some into labor. They gave them a work permit. When I got my first job, it was at Domino's Pizza years and years and years ago, obviously. I was like 13. And at a certain age, you needed to get a work permit in order to work. And that's essentially what the people of Israel did here. They gave them a work permit to continue to work in that land. So when it comes to having folks hang around and sort of working for you, there's any NBA fans in here? Anybody watch basketball? Okay. John Morant. Anybody know who John Morant is? Okay. John Morant, he's a shooting guard. Actually, I think he plays point guard for the Memphis Grizzlies. Tremendous athlete. He signed a $193 million Supermax contract extension at the beginning of last year. And then the wheels started to come off a little bit. I'm not sure if you're aware, he had some incidents of some infractions, some gun possession things, and some fights, and just some disturbing behavior that became problematic, that was being seen widely. He went to some therapy for a little bit to talk to some people, some sort of management classes, and then all of a sudden on the gram, he's shown brandishing a gun. And it was like, okay, final straw. We had to bench him and sit him down. And he's lining up endorsements with Nike and goodness knows what other company. And because of these antics, he's now going to be sort of losing some of that. I think he's serving a 25-game suspension for this upcoming season. So all these things are happening, and it's been theorized, and I've seen some posts and some news articles that suggest that it's because of the folks that he's allowing to hang around, because of some of the folks that maybe even be in his employment, that these things are happening. It's been suggested he should drive them out and dismiss them and sort of get them out of his life. But he hasn't quite done that yet, and you can see how these things are pushing him to the edge out of God's will and out of what God has for him, and possibly risking his career in that regard. And in like ways, the people of Israel sort of were the same. They didn't drive out the people. They sort of let them hang around, put some of them to work, and that's causing them to sort of miss out on what God has for them. And that was Israel's strategy. But Brother Corey preached very powerfully last week on the cancer of compromise. The cancer, I think it's interesting to use the term cancer because I think, I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure you can't have just a little bit of cancer. You can't have just a little bit. How many of you know that you sort of have to cut it all out? You have to get rid of all the cancer. Even a little bit of cancer will spread, and not driving out distractions is like leaving a few cells of cancer hanging around. Distractions spread if you don't drive them out. They will spread. And that's what the people of Israel did. They let some cancer cells just sort of hang out. They began to spread. When I was little, in school, if you wanted to go on a field trip or some sort of school activity, there's these things you have to take home to your mother or father and have them sign. Everybody know what those are? Permission slips, absolutely. They still use those? They still use, okay. Permission slips. And some of you are signing permission slips for things in your life that you shouldn't be signing. Some of you may be giving permission for certain things to slip in, and as a result, God is slipping out in your life. Some of you are like, I'll catch service. I'll just catch service on YouTube. That's a slip. Some of you might be like, I tithed last month. Okay, I just won't tithe. I won't tithe this month. That's a slip. I had a long day at work. I know my I group is supposed to meet today, but you know what? I'm just going to go home. That's a slip. I was serving faithfully, but what? I'm not going to serve anymore. That's a slip. I'm sure they have enough volunteers for that event, and I don't need to sign up for that. That's another slip. So a lot of us are slipping on things. We're giving permission slips to things in our life, and that's causing us to slip out of God's will and his purpose for our life. Turn to your neighbor and say, "You tripping, quit slipping." You're tripping, quit slipping. Quit slipping. You are tripping, quit slipping. Drive out distractions. We need you to drive out distractions. I took a corporate training course some years back, and one of the things the trainer said often during the session was, you can have all the strategy. It was a great leadership training course about tips and strategies on how to be a more powerful leader, how to impact your team, how to deal with conflict. And he said, I'm teaching a lot of things here, but one thing you got to remember is that you can have all the strategy you want in the world, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture will eat strategy for breakfast. And when we look at the people of Israel at this time, they let people hang around. They let them continue to work there. And what eventually happened is the culture of the inhabitants, their values, their principles, their gods, their idols started to seep in, such that God seeped out. Those things started to slip in, and they started to slip out of God's favor and God's will for the life. God was essentially edged out, so much that a generation arose that did not know the Lord. And again, the option is not to get with this or get with nothing. They eventually started serving other gods entirely. I'm almost done. You guys can come on up. Back to the bed for a second, because I'm still a little miffed about that. Still a little salty about what happened there. So, if I were, when this was happening, if I were in some way, shape, or form aware as it was happening, I would eventually sort of driven out the distractions, driven out my child, taken her back to his or her room, and then I would have had a peaceful sleep. But that requires sort of being vigilant. It requires being aware. It requires being awake. So my admonition to you is to remember to reach back and refresh yourself on all that God has done for you. That was point one. Make a daily choice to serve God by moving into your courage zone and taking possession of what he has given you so you can show up so he can show up powerfully for you. And to tear up all those permission slips that you've signed for things in your life, all these distractions, make sure you tear those up. All those things you've been signing, all these things that have been distracting you from what God is doing in your life so that you can confidently let go of ego, let go of edging God out. Stand to your feet. Pastor's going to pray for you.